Hi, my name's Chance. I'm an alcoholic. I should probably start at the beginning with the first time that I got drunk. I was 13 years old, and a buddy of mine was having a few friends over while his parents were out of town. Within the first few minutes after getting there, I started drinking beer, and I liked it so much that I finished a few within the first couple hours. After taking a few shots of whiskey, I remember the cops coming to the door, and we all had to run. That was my first experience with alcohol, and while a lot of the people that were there decided it probably not best to drink underage anymore, I really enjoyed my first experience. And looking back on it now, I can see that I didn't drink like most people. And I started drinking as much and as often as I could. I started drinking more and more often, and I was having problems with my dad at the time while I was living in Little Rock. We got into an altercation one night, and it did get physical. And later that week, my school found out about it and forced me to move back to my mom's house where I was born in Kansas City. When I moved back in with my mom, I was probably 17 years old, and drinking wasn't really enough anymore. I met a guy that was smoking weed, and ended up hanging out with him, and I started smoking weed within a month or so after moving back. And over the next few months, I started trying other things like cocaine and ecstasy. And before I knew it, I was selling a lot of these drugs along with doing them virtually every day. I was either high or drunk for the last couple years of my high school. I'm going into my senior year. I was failing most of my classes. I was either drinking or getting high every single day, most of the time, even before school. And the symptoms of what I was doing were causing huge rifts in my personal life with my friends and my family. And I started pushing people away. And I graduated high school, but just barely. Once I was out of my mom's house, it was all day, every day, drinking and doing drugs as much as I possibly could, and bills and things like that came second. And I I remember many times that I would drink and use so much that I would black out, and I'd wake up the next day and I'd have no idea what happened the night before. And I just wrote that off as partying. That's what kids do. That's what teenagers do. That's what everybody around me did. And I really just tried to blot out all of the problems I was creating for myself and for everyone around me, because it gave me an excuse to drink like I wanted to drink. And I got to a point pretty quickly where I wasn't able to really pay my own bills, and I had to move back in with my parents. And by that time, my drinking and drugging was so far out of control that anytime I was not drunk or high, I was so angry and I was so mean to the people around me that um, eventually my mom and my stepdad just couldn't have me in the house anymore. I was causing too many problems for them, and ultimately I had to move. I moved back in with my dad in Little Rock, and away from Kansas City. And again, looking back now, I mean, anybody in my position would stop drinking, or they'd at least go get evaluated by a counselor, or take some sort of positive action to stop the bleeding, so to speak, to stop the problems from happening, to get back on some even ground and start making something of my life. But what I did was I found people that were doing drugs, and I found people that were drinking when I moved to Little Rock, and I got around those people immediately. And it was the same story with different family. I got kicked out multiple times from their house. My stepmom found drugs in my room on more than one occasion. I was living with my sister and my two little brothers at the time as well. And my little brothers were quite a bit younger than me. And I'd gotten to the point where when I didn't have money, I had to get it from somewhere because not drinking and not drugging was not an option. And so I did things like steal from their piggy banks, and sometimes I took stuff from the house so that I could pawn it. Sometimes I took money from my dad's wallet or my stepmom's purse. Anything that I could do to continue doing what I was doing. And by this time, I knew there was something wrong, but I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought that I was crazy. I thought that I was not capable of living a normal life, that so many things had happened to me in my life that I was allowed to drink and to drug the way that I was, that it gave me a reason to use those as a coping mechanism. If you had the life that I had, then you would have to drink like I drank. And those were the kinds of things I'd tell myself. And I got kicked out on more than one occasion with them. And I remember one stint where I was living on friends' couches, and eventually I'd wear my welcome out with them, and I'd have to move to another house. And there were times when I didn't have a place to stay, and so I had to sleep on the church pews and hospitals and things like that. And there were a couple homeless nights where I slept on porches of abandoned houses. And so you go in just a few short years from a kid getting straight A's to a young adult, sleeping on porches and having really no place to live or place to call home. That's where my drinking and my drugs took me. And, this is about 20, 21 years old. I meet a girl at a party. We get together, and I find out that she's pregnant. And a month or so before she has the baby, I really start to try and control my drinking and control my drug use, and I just can't do it. There's no possible way for me to get it under control on my own. And she has the baby, and I'm trying to be a father, and I just can't. I can't find it in me to be the father that I know I should be. And a friend of hers suggested that I go to a treatment center for drugs and for alcohol. And he actually got me in there within a week or so of having that conversation. And basically at that point, I didn't have anything to my name, and I had this kid, and they offered me a better life in the treatment center, and they talked about a recovery program that would help me rebuild my life and make it even better than it had ever been. And I bought into that, and I started working hard at that. And eventually I moved in with some people, and I got into a halfway house where I was living sober, and they helped me find a job, and I started meeting new friends, and I was going to meetings on a regular basis, and I was doing the things that they were asking me to do to try and rebuild my life and to rebuild my relationships. And it was going great. It was going great. A few months after I got sober, though, I found out that kid wasn't mine. And at the time, that was devastating. And it was something that I used to want to drink over, or I would go, buy drugs over. And this time I didn't. This time I leaned into that recovery program, and I leaned into the friends that I had that were sober and that I was living with at the sober house. And I made it through that rough patch. And the next few years were really spent with me rebuilding those relationships with my stepmom and my dad, and with my sister and my little brothers, and my mom and my stepdad in Kansas City. And it was really going well, and people started to trust me again, and I paid back a lot of the debts that I owed. And my little brothers reminded me of the money that I'd taken from their piggy banks, and so I took them to go buy some video games one time to make that right even with them. And I have a lot of fond memories of doing things like that that really put me in a position where I should be, which is a good brother and a good son and just a good human being. And I've got a life today that I could only have dreamt of back then. And that's truly special to see where I've come from, to see where I am today. Um, it's not something that I thought was ever possible, but it's certainly a blessing in my life, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And I guess really to wrap this up, I guess all I can say is some people really do get second chances.